Jeremy Oliver here, talking about sparkling wine in Australia. And those of you who are patriotic and have moved away from drinking champagne, which by definition has to come from the Champagne region in France, you might be wondering, how good is the Australian sparkling wine that might be costing you somewhere between $45 and $85 a bottle? Is it any good? And how does that compare to the champagne that you might once have been drinking, which has now got, once again, it's got very, very, very expensive. So what's going on? And is the Australian wine, is it made with the same attention to detail as the French? Well, the truth is this. Once they've got to the cellar, once the grapes have been grown and got to the cellar where they're converted into a base wine and then put through the process that gives them the bubbles and creates the final package with the cork and the foil and so forth, and you end up with a sparkling wine. That process is pretty well the same now and has been in Australia for a long time as France. So it's called the Méthode Champenoise, and we can discuss that in more detail one day, but it's a process by which you start with a still white wine, sugar and yeast are added, a screw cap is jammed onto the top of the bottle, the sugar is fermented by the yeast, that gives you the bubbles which are in the fizz, and then you get rid of the dead yeast by a couple of processes, now all of which are technical and automated, and then you top up the bottles which have lost a little bit of wine because you've got rid of the yeast, and you lose wine with that process. So you top up the wine and you can give a little bit of sugar in at that stage. That process is the Méthode Champenoise, and that's pretty well universal today. Everyone's doing that. So if you want to know if the bottle that you are buying is made that way in Australia, you'll probably see words like Méthode Traditionnelle or Champagne Method or Méthode Champenoise. You can interpret whether or not the producers are doing the right thing in terms of the process. But generally speaking, in Australia today, anything over $25 would pretty well be made properly in that technique. So quality-wise, I'm frequently, happily surprised by wines I try from Australia at the top end. Now they could come from, and a lot do come from Tasmania, Adelaide Hills, parts of Victoria, occasionally Western Australia, but those, generally speaking, the cooler parts of our country can produce sparkling wines that are actually better than some of the champagnes that are lining the stacks and the floors of our bottle shops. So just because it's Australian doesn't mean it's inferior. Now, it would be wrong for me to say that the best Australian sparkling wine is better than the best French. I would never say that, but we do have a really, really healthy high end of sparkling wine production, and we should be really proud of that. Whether or not they are worth what you might see as excessively high price tags is really up to you, because you're the buyer. You determine ultimately what these wines are going to succeed at or not, whether you buy them or not. But I would say that there's a good representation of Australian sparkling wine, $45 to $85, that provides outstanding value for money when compared to wines from France, Italy, Spain, and New Zealand. So I think we really punch well, especially, as I say, if the wines come from Tasmania or the cooler regions in other states. So give them a try, make up your own mind, but just because they're not champagne, don't write them off. And remember, if you're not enjoying it, don't bother drinking it.